My father gave my savings to my brother's failing business while I was recovering from surgery. And my mother, my aunt, and grandfather had all known for months before I found out. They didn't warn me. They didn't ask me. They had quiet conversations about my money, my future, my recovery, and what they thought was best for me. Their conclusion was that family helps family. That I would understand eventually. That my brother needed it more than I did right then. So I gave them exactly what they deserved. Not a lawsuit. Not a screaming match at Thanksgiving dinner. Just absence. Clean, complete permanent absence. And 3 years later, they are still trying to understand how someone who used to call home every Sunday simply stopped existing in their world. My name is Owen. I was 32 when it happened. I worked as a structural engineer for a mid-sized firm in Calgary. The kind of work that is mostly invisible until something goes wrong. Load calculations, foundation assessments, seismic retrofits on older buildings, that people walk through every day without ever wondering whether someone checked the math. I was good at it. Methodical, patient. The kind of person who reads every clause of a contract before signing anything. Those habits mattered later more than I could have predicted. My brother's name is not important to this story. What matters is what he was. 2 years older than me, charming in the specific way that makes people feel important for about 45 minutes before they realize nothing he said was actually about them. He ran a landscaping company that had been in slow collapse for about 4 years. Every spring he would announce that this was the turnaround season. Every autumn he would quietly ask to borrow money for payroll. Our parents always said yes. I said yes twice, and then I learned to say I'll think about it, which he learned to interpret as no. Which is probably why what happened next skipped me entirely. In January of the year this all unfolded, I went in for a routine knee surgery. A torn meniscus from a skiing accident the previous December. Not dramatic, very fixable, 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, home physiotherapy, back to normal by spring. I had good disability coverage through work. I had savings. I had a 1-bedroom apartment in Kensington and a life that fit me well. I went into that surgery feeling settled in a way I had not always felt in my 20s. I came out of it to a text from my mother saying everything went great. Sweetie, we love you. That part was real. The rest of what happened while I was on painkillers and unable to work took me 3 months to piece together. My brother had gone to my father, sometime in December, before my surgery, asking for $40,000. He needed it to cover outstanding supplier invoices, he said. The company was close to profitable, he said. Just one more bridge loan and everything would stabilize. My father did not have $40,000 sitting free. My mother had recently been off work with her own health issue. Their retirement savings were tied up in the house. What my father did have was the spare key to my apartment. And the knowledge that I kept my financial documents in a filing cabinet in my office nook. I know this because I found the transfer records myself. $40,000 moved out of my emergency savings account on the 14th of January. 4 days after my surgery, while I was home on prescription painkillers being visited by my well-meaning mother, who brought soup and adjusted my pillow, and never said a single word about what my father had done with my money 3 days earlier. I want to sit with that for a second. She knew when she came over with that soup. She knew when she tucked a blanket around my legs and asked if I needed anything. She knew while she loaded my dishwasher and reorganized my fridge and told me to rest. She stood in my kitchen with that knowledge and said nothing. I did not discover the missing money right away. I was not checking my accounts carefully during recovery. I trusted my life was staying put while I healed. The first indication something was wrong came in early April when I went online to move money for my quarterly RRSP contribution, and the balance was not what I expected. I assumed at first it was a bank error. I called the bank. They walked me through the transaction history. One outgoing transfer $40,000 January 14th. Authorized from my online banking. My online banking that I had never shared the credentials for with anyone. Except, once, 2 Christmases ago, I had been visiting my parents for the holidays, and my laptop was updating. And I had quickly logged in from my father's computer to transfer money to a friend for concert tickets. I had logged out. I had not considered that a browser might have saved something. That a man who trusted his sons might have had his browser fill in a field without asking. That my father, my careful, church-going, mortgage-paid-off father, would write down what he saw and use it 14 months later while his son was unconscious on a surgical table. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after that phone call. Then I called my father. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was normal. "Hey bud, how's the knee?" "Good," I said. "Did you transfer money out of my savings account in January?" A pause. Not long enough to suggest he didn't understand the question. Just long enough to tell me he had been waiting for it. "We should talk in person," he said. I said I'd be over Thursday. I did not go Thursday. I went to the bank instead and requested a full audit of my account activity. Then I called a friend from university who worked in fraud law. I explained the situation over the phone. He was quiet for most of it. When I finished he said, Is your father named on the account at all? No. Did you ever give him written authorization? No. He said what you're describing is fraud. I said, I know. He said what do you want to do? I said I wasn't sure yet. He said, call me when you are. I spent the next 2 weeks being methodical. I went through every bank account I had. I checked my TFSA, my checking, my investment account. I changed every password, every security question. I called my bank and put a verbal confirmation on any outgoing transfer over $500. Then I started calling around. Not confronting anyone, just listening. I called my aunt, my mother's older sister who lived out in Red Deer and who had always had a complicated relationship with my father's side of the family. I told her I was feeling disconnected from everyone since the surgery. She said, well, it hasn't been easy for anyone this winter, has it? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, with everything your father did to help your brother. A pause. She stopped herself. I said nothing. I just waited. She said, I probably shouldn't. It's just, I thought you knew by now. I said I'm starting to figure it out. She said your grandfather thinks your dad did the right thing. That family comes first. She said it like she was repeating someone else's words, maybe to distance herself from them. Then she said, I'm sorry, Owen. I really am. And she meant it. But she had known since February. She had known for 2 months, and had not called. That was the moment that changed the shape of the betrayal. Not just my father taking the money. Not just my mother knowing when she sat on my couch with her soup. My aunt, my grandfather. An entire support structure of people who had been informed, had discussed it, had landed on the same conclusion, let Owen figure it out, and had gone back to their lives. I kept that information to myself for another 3 weeks. During that time, I visited my parents. The first time since I started piecing things together. Sunday dinner. My mother made her brisket, my brother was there with his girlfriend. My grandfather drove in from Airdrie. It was a normal family dinner in the way that a stage set is a normal room. Everything placed correctly, nothing quite real. I watched my father carve the meat and make everyone laugh and refill glasses, and I thought about the word methodical. I had always used it to describe my work. That night it described something else. I asked my father about the business, just casually. How's this landscaping operation going? My brother jumped in before my father could answer. Really turning a corner, he said. Great quarter ahead. I looked at my father. He looked at his plate for exactly 1 second too long. My grandfather said, your brother works hard, Owen. I said, I know. My mother offered more brisket. I said yes thank you. After dinner while my mother and grandfather were in the kitchen, I told my father and brother I needed to use the bathroom. I went upstairs, walked past the bathroom, and stood for a moment in the doorway of my father's home office. Nothing dramatic. I just wanted to see it. The desk, the chair, the computer where he might have sat and thought about whether what he was doing was wrong. The room looked exactly like it always did. That made it worse somehow. I came downstairs, said good night, drove home, and called my friend in fraud law the next morning. What are my options? He walked me through them. Criminal complaint to the police was one. Civil claim was another. He said, given the amount, $40,000 is not small, you have a real case. He also said, your father is likely to claim you authorized it. Do you have anything in writing that contradicts that? I said, I have a text from him the day of the transfer that doesn't mention it. I have nothing in writing where I gave permission. He said, that's something. What do you want to do? I said, I want to remove myself completely. From the finances, from the family, from anything they can reach. And then I want to watch what happens when I'm just gone. He said, I can help with the financial piece. The rest is up to you. We spent 2 weeks doing what needed doing. I moved my remaining savings to a new financial institution, a credit union in a different part of the city, no family connections, nothing familiar. I changed my mailing address to a P.O. box. I contacted my employer's HR department about removing my emergency contact listing. My mother had been on file for years. I updated it to my friend. I reviewed my benefits and updated beneficiary information on everything. I called CRA and added a security flag to my account on the advice of my lawyer, just to be careful. I did not confront my father again. I did not call my mother. I did not tell my brother that I knew. I gave them nothing to prepare for. On a Tuesday in late April, I went to my HR department and asked about remote placement options. The firm had a partnership with a structural engineering group in Halifax that was doing a lot of work on coastal infrastructure and municipal buildings, exactly the kind of projects I was good at. I had always wanted to see the East Coast properly. I said I was ready to commit to 12 months minimum. They said they could have a transfer ready in 6 weeks. I also started looking at apartments in Halifax that same week. I found one in the North End, second floor of a century home, hardwood floors, a bay window that looked out at a residential street, with actual trees on it. I paid first and last. I signed nothing with my Calgary address on it. My father called that Thursday to follow up on the conversation I had never actually shown up for. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was careful in the way a man is careful when he knows he has done something indefensible. Owen, We really need to sit down and talk about some things. Call me when you can. I did not call back. My mother called Friday. I did not answer. My brother called Saturday morning. I did not answer that either. On the second Tuesday of May, a moving company came to my apartment and packed everything except what fit in my car. I had booked them 3 weeks earlier. I had said nothing to anyone in my family. My neighbors thought I was going on a long trip. I had not corrected them. The night before I left, I wrote one paragraph on a piece of paper. I know about the $40,000. I know when it happened. I know who knew. I've decided not to pursue legal action at this time. Do not contact me. If you attempt to reach me through my workplace, I will reconsider that decision. I left it in an envelope addressed to my father. I mailed it with a Calgary postmark the morning I drove out of the city. I did not deliver it in person. I did not want a conversation. I wanted a statement of fact. I drove east with my car loaded, and a podcast playing, and the mountains getting smaller in my mirror until they were just a line and then nothing. Halifax received me with fog and salt air, and the sound of gulls complaining about everything. I arrived on a Friday evening, picked up my keys from the landlord, carried boxes up a narrow staircase, and sat on the floor of my new apartment with a gas station sandwich and a cup of terrible coffee. And felt something I could not immediately name. Not relief. Not triumph. Something quieter. The specific stillness that comes when you stop waiting for something bad to happen, because the bad thing already happened, and you are now on the other side of it. I started work the following Monday. The Halifax team was small. 7 engineers, a project coordinator named Sylvie, who ran the office like a ship captain, and a rotating cast of contractors and inspectors. They did not know anything about me except my credentials and my transfer date. I was just Owen, the guy from Calgary, good with seismic calculations. That was enough for me. The first few weeks I left my old phone on, out of something I can only describe as curiosity about the shape of their panic. My father called 11 times in the first 4 days. His voicemails went from confused to hurt to something that sounded like controlled anger without quite getting there. Owen, I understand you're upset. We need to discuss this as a family. Then, Owen, I want to explain. It's not as simple as it looks. Then, your mother is very worried. Please just let her know you're okay. My mother's messages were softer and worse. She cried in 2 of them. Not dramatically. Just the quiet, leaking kind that is harder to listen to. She said she was sorry. She said she should have told me. She said she did not understand why I wasn't answering. My brother called once, left a message that started with man and ended with come on, which about covered the depth of his engagement with the situation. My grandfather called twice. His messages were formal and brief, like a man who was not comfortable with voicemail as a medium, and was also not entirely sure he was the villain here. He said, Owen, this family has been through hard things before. We always get through them. A pause. Call your mother. I turned the phone off after 2 weeks, put it in the back of my sock drawer. 3 months later, I pulled it out and turned it on to look at the shape of what had accumulated. 61 missed calls, 47 texts, a voicemail from my aunt in Red Deer, apologetic, genuine, about 45 seconds long. She said she should have called me directly when she found out and she was sorry she hadn't. That message I listened to twice. I did not call her back, but I kept the voicemail. My brother had texted a total of 6 times. The progression was, come on man, I know you're pissed. Look, it wasn't my idea. Dad handled this wrong, but you're punishing everyone. The company's really struggling, man, I need you to understand. Okay. Well, I guess silence is your answer. He was right. It was. My father's texts were longer and harder to read. He explained the business situation. He explained his reasoning. He used the phrase protecting the family 4 times. He said he had intended to tell me, as soon as I was recovered, and on my feet. He said $40,000 would not ruin me. But it might have saved the company. The company, for context, had gone under by May. Whatever my $40,000 had bought, it had bought 2 more months. I turned the phone off again and went back to my life. Halifax suited me in ways I had not anticipated. I had expected to be functional there. I had not expected to belong. But there is something about a city that faces the ocean. Something about the way weather moves through it. The way people talk to strangers. The way a Saturday morning at the farmer market in the North End feels different from anywhere I had lived before. I bought a second-hand road bike. I started running along the waterfront on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. I learned which coffee shops had good Wi-Fi. And which ones had better quiet. I met Simone at a trivia night, at a bar near Gottingen Street, 8 months after I moved. She was a physiotherapist, who specialized in sports rehab, and had an opinion about everything, including the correct answer to a question about Canadian prime ministers that I happened to know she was wrong about. She did not concede the point immediately. I respected that. We argued about it for 20 minutes and then went for a walk that lasted 2 hours. Simone did not fix me. I want to be clear about that. Because people tell a certain kind of story about new relationships after family wounds, and I have no interest in that story. What Simone did was exist without agenda. She said what she thought. She did not create tests for me to pass, or emotional minefields for me to navigate. When I eventually told her what had happened in Calgary, she listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "What are you going to do about the money legally? Not poor you, not your family sounds terrible, just, what's the next practical step?" I almost laughed. I said I hadn't decided. She said, "Let me know if you want a second opinion when you do." That was it. That was the whole conversation. About a year after I left Calgary, my aunt tracked down my email address. I still do not know how, and sent me a message that was 3 paragraphs long. She wrote that my grandfather was having health problems. Partial blockage, she said. Cardiac. They had done a procedure but his recovery was difficult. She wrote that my mother was struggling and barely sleeping. She wrote that my brother's company was finished, and he was working at a hardware store, and living with my parents. She wrote, "I'm not asking you to fix anything, Owen. I just thought you should know. I'm sorry I didn't call you sooner." That part she meant. I could tell the difference by then between people who were sorry, and people who wanted the discomfort of their guilt to end. I read her email twice. Wrote a reply, deleted it. Wrote a shorter one, deleted that. Eventually I sent 3 words. "Thank you, Sylvie." An autocomplete error. Her name was the same as my project coordinator, and apparently my hands had their own opinion about how much to give back. I sent a correction immediately. "Thank you, Aunt Carol." I did not respond beyond that. What I did do was call my fraud lawyer. I told him I wanted to formally document the unauthorized transfer in a legal notice, not as a precursor to a lawsuit but as a record. He drafted something and I signed it. It exists now in a file. My father knows it exists. I made sure of that through my lawyer. That was the only communication I directed toward him in the first 2 years. My grandfather's cardiac event turned out to be serious enough that he spent 6 weeks in the Foothills Medical Center. My aunt kept me informed through occasional emails that I read carefully and responded to briefly. I did not go back. My father sent a message through my aunt asking me to visit before something happened. My aunt was transparent about it. She forwarded it with a note that said, "I'm not pushing you either way, Owen, just passing it along." I appreciated the honesty. People expect a dramatic decision in that moment. The dying grandfather, the estranged family, the airport scene with the reunion. I did not have a dramatic decision. I had a Sunday morning in November, fog on the harbor, Simone reading on the couch, the dog we had adopted 3 months earlier asleep in a pile of himself on the rug. I sat with a cup of coffee and thought about what going back would mean. Not what it would look like, what it would mean. Whether my presence would give my grandfather peace or give my family permission to close the chapter without consequence. I decided to write him a letter instead. Not a warm letter, not a cold one, an honest one. I told him I had loved him for 32 years. I told him I understood that his generation had a different definition of what families owed each other. I told him I did not think he was a bad man. I also told him that what happened had changed things permanently, and that I needed him to understand that before whatever came next. I mailed it. I do not know if he read it. He did not respond, or if he did, the response never reached me. He stabilized. He did not die that winter. My aunt told me he had improved enough to go home by Christmas. She said he asked about me. She said she had shown him a photo I had sent her the previous summer, me and Simone at Cape Breton, laughing at something the photographer had not caught. She said he looked at it for a long time. My father wrote to me directly, for the first time about 18 months after I left. A letter, actual paper, with a Calgary postmark. I do not know how he found my P.O. box. His handwriting was the same as it had always been, careful, upright, a teacher's handwriting from decades of writing on whiteboards. He wrote that he understood why I had left. He wrote that he had told himself he would pay it back before I ever noticed, and that he had been wrong to believe that. Wrong to do it. Wrong not to tell me when it happened. He wrote that he had not considered what the surgery meant, that I was vulnerable, and he had used that window. He wrote that he was not asking forgiveness because he did not think he had earned the right to ask. He wrote, "I know you have a life there now. I hope it's good. I love you. I'm sorry." I sat with that letter for 4 days. Simone knew something was going on but did not push. On the 4th night I came into the kitchen where she was doing a crossword at the table, and I read it to her out loud. She listened the whole way through. When I finished she said, "What do you need?" I said. "I don't know yet," she said, "take your time." Then she went back to her crossword. I did not respond to my father's letter. I thought about it seriously for 2 weeks. What stopped me was not anger. By that point, the acute part of the anger had passed. What stopped me was the recognition that responding would reopen something I had organized my entire Halifax life around keeping closed. That the cost of giving him that would be paid by me, not by him. That his relief was not my responsibility to provide. I put the letter in the same folder as my aunt's voicemail. Evidence that some of them understood, eventually, what they had done. That is worth something. It is not worth the same thing as not doing it in the first place. But it is worth something. 2 years after leaving Calgary, I received a formal letter from my father's solicitor. He had put $40,000 into a trust in my name. No conditions, no strings, no request for acknowledgement. Just a transfer of funds with a note from the solicitor that said, "Your father asked me to let you know this is a return, not a gift." The distinction was important enough to him to put in writing. I thought about that, for a long time. I instructed my own lawyer to accept the transfer and say nothing beyond confirmation of receipt. 3 years on, I am 35. Senior engineer, small promotion 6 months ago. Projects across Nova Scotia and PEI that I am proud of in the specific way that engineering pride works. Quietly, structurally, in things that will still be standing long after anyone remembers who checked the math. Simone and I bought a place in the south end of Halifax last spring. Actual ownership this time, my name and hers, a house with a backyard and a front porch, and a maple tree that turns an unreasonable color in October. The dog approves. My old phone is in a box in the basement. I turned it on once last spring. Out of nothing I can clearly explain, maybe the same instinct that makes you check a scar you know has healed. There were messages. My brother had written twice in the past year. The last one, from the previous November said, "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just hope you're doing okay." That is the only message from him in 3 years that did not ask for anything. My mother still sends emails to an account I check occasionally. They are not long. She learned somewhere along the way that long wasn't landing. They are usually 2 or 3 sentences. "I'm thinking of you. I made the brisket last Sunday. I hope wherever you are, you're happy." I have not responded to any of them. I am not certain I will, but I read them. People say the wound stays open if you don't seek closure. I have found the opposite to be true for me. The wound I closed is the one that was still bleeding, the one where I kept showing up to a table that had already decided what I was worth. Closing that was not cruelty. It was self-preservation that looked like cruelty, from the outset, which I understand, and which I have made peace with. My grandfather is still alive. He is 81 and slower than he was, but stubborn in the way of men who have outlasted most of their expectations. My aunt tells me he still asks about me. She says he talks about a fishing trip we took when I was 9, somewhere north of Rocky Mountain House, where I caught a walleye, and he acted like I had done something genuinely impressive. I remember that trip. I remember thinking that weekend that adults were mostly decent, and that the world made a kind of sense. I was 9, I have revised those conclusions. But I keep the memory. I let it be what it was, a good day with a man who later made a bad choice about whose side he was on when it mattered. People are not one thing. That does not require me to return to them. Some mornings I sit on the front porch with coffee while the street is still quiet, and think about the version of me who drove east, with a car full of boxes. And no clear plan beyond not being there anymore. That person was doing the only thing that felt true. This person. The one writing this, with the mortgage and the dog, and the woman inside finishing her coffee before work, is what happened when that turned out to be enough. The people in Calgary sometimes still talk about me, I imagine. There is probably still an empty chair somewhere at Christmas. My mother probably still sets a place and removes it when the night gets too late. My brother probably still tells himself a version of the story where he is the unfortunate bystander. My father probably reads his copy of the letter he sent me, and wonders whether I read it. I did, I kept it. It does not change what happened. It does not give them back what they lost when they decided, it together, in conversations I was not invited to, that I was the easiest thing to sacrifice. What they took was $40,000. What they lost was me. That math never balanced and it never will. And standing on my front porch in Halifax watching the maple do its October thing, I find that I am entirely at peace with being the variable they didn't properly account for.